Hello and welcome to National Association of Black and White Men Together. This is an effort of the Media Committee. My name is Demetrius and I am coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my better half, my fellow co-chair, my teammate, go ahead and say it.
This is Ken Scott Barron from the golden state of California with the wonderful Long Beach. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all that you do for us, and especially thanks to you, Demetrius, for being my partner in this one.
Absolutely, it's a team effort. So the United States election this year is a chance to negate the damage caused by the current administration, which has affected our values domestically and internationally.
What used to be the normal policies and compromise has led to greed and profits being held paramount. The administration has ruined our lives because of racism and xenophobia. The US, and particularly the people, have a reputation for honesty and decency, which has been shattered by broken agreements that relate to the National Association of Black and White Men Together values. There are insults to people at the margin, ignoring the lives of everyday people. We urge our members and allies to focus their outrage on defeating these same politicians at the ballot box. November 3rd, Election Day, will be an election about the country's future and what path its citizens wish to choose. We strongly suggest that you all vote like your lives depend on it.
The administration has sullied White House, federal agencies, and potentially the Supreme Court with hard moves and directives that hurt poor and working class folks. This is an unending corruption and behind the scenes dealing to profit those in charge and their followers. Lobbying, allowed in normal times, has moved to a higher level of graft, where foreign governments, foundations, and associations choose to spend money at establishments owned by the president. This impropriety occurs at properties outside the US as well. When the president or his family members visit a Trump property, taxpayers foot the bill for the security details that must tag along. The US government and you, the taxpayers, pay this cost.
And so we also know foreign entities seem to be able to take advantage of the administration's lack of scruples and lack of foreign policy ideas, according to US officials familiar with the related intelligence reports. Corruption has seeped into the US departments with poor ethics at the Interior, the EPA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Health and Human Services, and I can go on, and Veterans Affairs. Recall that the president in 2016 said he would, quote, drain the swamp. That did not happen.
Turning to science, the administration has decided to negate policies, deny and ignore what is happening in the world. Science should be sound policy, but institutions essential to determining these policies have been muted and misrepresented. Our foreign policy is a disaster. The National Security Advisor abruptly announced that the US would reduce its troops again in Afghanistan. But later, the president tweeted that he wanted them all back by Christmas. The Department of Defense noted again that it does not respond to demands over Twitter.
And perhaps the biggest crisis is, and will be for some time, the COVID-19 pandemic. We should have been better prepared for this and next crises of the same type and others, and of course, future waves of the current one. The United States has to devote political and economic resources to reducing the domestic and global vulnerabilities that jeopardize individual, national, and global health security. Two Johns Hopkins epidemiologists estimated that if the US government had issued social distancing guidelines 2 weeks earlier in March, the United States could have cut deaths by 83% in the first months of the pandemic. Had the guidelines been issued just 1 week earlier, mortality would still have dropped by 55%.
The president's response to the pandemic has been miserable, inconsistent, and damaging. The federal coronavirus response shows a president avoiding responsibility for the pandemic. People in other countries overwhelmingly believe the U.S. has done a bad job dealing with COVID-19. Across the 13 countries surveyed this summer, a median of 84% of adults say the U.S. has done a bad job dealing with the coronavirus outbreak, including 53% who say it has done a very bad job. A median of only 15% of adults in the surveyed countries see the U.S. response positively.
Opinions about the US responses are especially negative in South Korea, Denmark, Germany, and Belgium. In each of these countries, around 9 to 10 adults say the US response to COVID-19 has been bad, including roughly 2/3 in South Korea, 66% to be true, and Belgium, 64%, who say it has been very bad.
This brings us to the topic of racism. The video of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis triggered protests around the world. It brought renewed attention to the high-profile deaths of Black Americans, an ongoing concern about systemic racism in the criminal justice system.
During COVID-19, which has disproportionately affected and killed Black people, which has exposed racial inequalities in every aspect of American life. And corporations are pledging to combat systematic racism in their countries. Some cities are considering proposals to reduce funds, not abolish, police departments. And activists have renewed calls to remove Confederate monuments, with some even toppling the statues themselves. The good news is that people are attending marches and having more quiet conversations with their families and friends, producing stories, videos, photo essays, audio, and graphics on Black history, progress, inequality, and injustice. But we all must vote in November to make these actions produce politicians that understand our values and issues.
Finally, let's talk about homophobia and the administration's attack on the LGBTQ+ community. This includes healthcare access, unsafe schools, and military service. Trump has endangered the LGBTQ+ lives in countless ways. These 8 are among those appalling. Since the current president took office, dozens, if not hundreds, of decisions have been made that make life materially worse for queer Americans, not to mention for intersecting and ally communities. There has been attacks on the Affordable Care Act. There has been appointments of homophobic judges and the banning of the rainbow flag at U.S. embassies. There is a long track record of claiming to support equality, but implementing policies that harm queer people.
So, one of the most clear-cut ways the administration has expressed hostility towards queer people is Trump's refusal to support the Equality Act. This would ensure that existing civil rights protection cover sexual orientation and gender identity in a way that they are already do for race, disability, veteran status, and more. The Equality Act is supported by a broad coalition of dozens of groups, including civil rights organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union and the Human Rights Watch. So businesses like Apple, Google, and Netflix, and religious groups like the United Church of Christ, and many more.
The White House has fought to deny basic protections to queer people. Trump frequently flip-flops on his position regarding LGBTQ plus equality. He said that he was, quote, fine with marriage equality, but also said he was opposed to it and would strongly consider, end of quote, appointing justices to overturn it. And after leaving the administration, the Equality Act has bipartisan support in Congress, and national polling has shown 70% of public support. It's been endorsed by various business groups and hundreds of major corporations. It passed the House in 2019, but is currently stalled in the Republican-controlled Senate.
Donald Trump has appointed an unprecedented number of judges who hold extreme anti-LGBT views, and not just the Supreme Court. These judges will hold their positions for life, threatening decades of regressive homophobic rulings. The strategy of the Republicans for years has been to block nominees from President Obama and then rubber stamp nominees from Trump. Many of these being deemed, quote, not qualified by the prestigious American Bar Association. Many of those judges are associated with the homophobic Federalist Society, which compares same-sex marriage to polygamy.
The appointment of these judges is particularly dangerous because many civil rights victories for the LGBTQ plus community have been won through litigation, dating all the way back to the One Inc. case in 1958, which overturned laws preventing gay people from using the mail. Non-discrimination, sexual freedom, marriage, and access to public accommodations have all been considered by federal courts. And now, more homophobic judges than ever could hear challenges to those precedents.
So if you didn't think it would get worse, the Trump administration has blocked basic job protections for queer people, insisting that employers should be free to fire workers for even suspecting that they might be LGBT. Under Trump, the administration filed briefs arguing that existing civil rights laws should not be interpreted to cover sexual orientation and gender identity. The same administration also pushed a policy change that would allow federal contractors to discriminate against LGBT employees. The policy dated back to 1965 and would have granted contractors wide latitude to claim religious freedom as justification for mistreating employees, essentially ending non-discrimination protections for queer workers, since they're not explicitly protected by non-discrimination laws.
The Department of Health and Human Services wiped out medical protections for queer people established under Obama's Affordable Care Act. The rule change ends a policy that protected queer people during this deadly pandemic, which has disproportionate health risk for LGBTQ plus people. Queer people are more than twice as likely to be uninsured than straight Americans. And studies shown that the ACA led to a significant increase in coverage for LGBTQ plus people of low income.
And as an educator, I know in schools, queer students have had more difficulty accessing education under Donald Trump's failure to investigate cases of violence in schools. The Secretary of Education began dismantling regulations that protected transgender students. She also suspended investigations into complaints from trans students that they were denied educational access. This failure to provide safe access to education is of particular concern in the light of difficulties that 70% of LGBTQ plus students face harassment at school and are disproportionately likely to miss school and lose opportunities to pursue higher education.
the Trump administration has made it more difficult for LGBTQ+ to find and remain in stable housing. The Department of Housing and Urban Development proposed a new rules that would allow homeless shelters to turn away transgender people. Civil liberty groups pointed out that the rule change, which is currently being contested, would result in transgender women potentially being forced into shelters alongside men, placing them at further risk of violence and assault. In the military, in the first year of Trump's administration, was his plan to block transgender people from serving openly in the military. The policy went into effect in 2019, but it has faced legal and legislative challenges. Democrats proposed a 2021 defense appropriations bill that would end Trump's ban, and various legal challenges remain before the courts.
So it is indeed a turning point, and that turning point can become different in November 3rd. And for all these reasons we've just outlined, please vote early or at the polls to fight for our civil rights and affirm what we stand for: a just and democratic society for all. So we're going to sign off right now and advise you to go and look on Facebook for a variety of situations and policies we've discussed. NABWMT.org is our website. And this is Ken Barron signing off from Long Beach.
And this is Demetrius from Milwaukee, Wisconsin signing off. Have a good one, and remember, vote.